All right, we're back with the coffee talks here at HPE Discover in Las Vegas, and joining us for the next. How long have we got you for, Rick? We've got Rick for an hour, and we're probably going to have Paul Miller join us partway through to add. So I'll hand straight over to Rick to get started.
Great. Thanks for coming to Discover, and it's good to see a few familiar faces here. I've spoken with you on various occasions, so I really appreciate your interest and all of your writing on the things that we're doing. So I'm Rick Lewis. I lead the Software Defined and Cloud group. That's where we do our products that have software as the primary value proposition or are mostly software. As you probably have heard now through the various sessions here at Discover, we have really gotten laser focused on our corporate strategy around three key pillars. The first is around making hybrid IT simple. The second is powering the intelligent edge. And the third is providing the services and expertise to help customers transform their environments and deal with digital transformation and enable digital transformation. So that has enabled us in the last year even, and a bit before that, to really make some pretty big, bold moves. You've seen that as a company. Some spin merges, some divestitures, which for a while I think people were wondering, hey, what's going on? It seems like you're just getting rid of things. But the answer to that is actually there was a method to our madness, and that was so that we could enable ourselves to get more aggressive around those three key strategic pillars. The one that is most near and dear to me is the one in making hybrid IT simple. So what I thought I would do today is just give you a little bit of a, here's where we're at on the things that we're doing in software-defined infrastructure and our hybrid IT management software space. And maybe I'll talk for, 15 minutes or so, just to give you kind of the high level of what we're doing. And then I'll kind of go into Q&A and we'll see where we end up from there. So to make hybrid IT simple, it turns out takes a whole lot of software. And that's what we're working on in my group. And the way that we deliver that software to customers is primarily through integrated appliances. So hyperconverged device is obviously a software-defined infrastructure element, a lot of software in that. Made a bold move here in this last year. In fact, I'll summarize the three. Hyperconverged, our Synergy composable platform, and something that we're talking about for the first time here at Discover, which is something we call HPE New Stack. It's not a branding, it's more of an kind of a project name that we've given it for what we're developing. And those are our three key vectors that we're driving, if you will, around making hybrid IT simple. So on the first of those, the big news is SimpliVity. We closed that acquisition in February of this year. The team and the technology fit like a glove with what we were trying to do with Hyperconverged. As many of you know, we have our own HC380 product that we're delivering, where we had put a lot of investment into simple user experience, ease of deployment, capabilities like that. And SimpliVity had spent most of their time growing an enterprise data services platform that's fantastic at integrated dedupe compression, backup, WAN optimization, all of the things that you dedupe and compress for and provide those industry-leading storage data services was really their background, and they had been kind of moving up the stack to more of the user interface in that. So putting the two together just made a whole lot of sense. We have good traction in that SimpliVity business, and in fact, we've been shipping now OmniStack on the HPE hardware for a few months. And more recently, now you can order it as a single SKU appliance, and we can deliver it from either our factory or our network of global channel partners around the world. Literally worldwide, we're now delivering this SimpliVity appliance as an HPE appliance. So really happy with that. With where that is, I would say the results on that are exceeding our optimistic projections for what we thought we could do with SimpliVity. So we're really happy with the progress, and we have a rich roadmap coming up of things we're doing, including putting Gen 10 in there when Gen 10 comes out here in September. So whole lot of good action in the hyperconverged space, and I'll talk about in a little bit Well, in fact, I'll mention a little bit about it now so that I don't forget. We bought SimpliVity not only for Hyperconverged, but also because we love the data services so much, we thought it would fit really well in our composable infrastructure, so in our Synergy platforms. And we plan to bring that SimpliVity data, software-defined storage capability into our composable platform. So really looking forward to that. Second pillar is Synergy, composable infrastructure. You guys have blogged about that in the past, and we've talked about it. And the best news on Synergy is that we've been shipping now since December in volume, and we have almost 400 customers globally around the world. People using it as, to drive DevOps changes. We have people on stage here talking about that, as well as people using it as replacement for their Blade infrastructure. People using it to compose and recompose infrastructure dynamically to a set of workloads that span from bare metal workloads to virtualized workloads to container-based workloads, cloud-native workloads. So we're really pretty darn happy about that and the use cases. And in fact, we had a set of customers on stage. We had customers for SimpliVity as well. Forgot to mention that. In fact, Red Bull Racing was on stage with me yesterday. And then we've had a bunch of customers on stage with us on Synergy, speaking about how they're using it. So some of the more notable ones, DreamWorks Animation, not only did my session, but had a main stage video some of you might have seen during Meg's presentation in the general session. So DreamWorks Animation, Redbox, Washington Department of Transportation, Symmetry, which is a service provider that's doing HANA in-memory database and Hadoop in the same Synergy frames and flexing resources to those two workloads and providing that as a service to their end customers. Who am I missing that we had on stage? I think I got at least the ones that were near my stage. I know there were some more that weren't on mine that we mentioned in some earlier sessions. So, and those, like I said, almost 400 customers worldwide. So Synergy has great traction, and it's obvious that it should, because there's nothing like it in the market that can do the things it can do. And what's amazing is even for customers who are just saying, hey, I just want to upgrade my traditional infrastructure. I'm not yet concerned about how I would use this to do anything beyond either virtual machines or bare metal. It has fantastic bandwidth and performance built for the next generation. We were shipping C7000 for 10 years, still are shipping, continuing on here. Synergy is built for the next 10 years and has fantastic performance and bandwidth. In fact, #1 VM benchmarks, #1 SAP benchmarks, a whole lot of things, and that's all on Gen 9. That's even before we ship Gen 10 with Synergy, which comes up here in September. So Synergy, great momentum. It's so fun to be here talking. I'm just beaming like a proud father when I see the videos of DreamWorks Animation talking about how, they're flexing workloads and doing rendering at night for animation and business processes during the day, and really taking advantage and exercising the full value proposition of what it was we were trying to deliver with Synergy, except now it's live and in production at these customers. So super excited about that.
Talk more about that, because that's a huge example.
Yeah, so here on the side, Chris is saying, hey, say a little more about that. Anything in particular?
So we talked about Synergy as being bimodal. And there was concern in the room when we talked about it last year about there's a lot of use cases where we're just saying replacement blades. And I think over this past year, I think we've all been really excited about how customers are using Synergy in a bimodal environment. And so those examples like DreamWorks and Symmetry, those are just perfect, because it's really using the infrastructure the way we designed it.
Yeah, I think you just said it. Yeah, nicely done. So certainly we have customers using those use cases, and even customers. Hudson Alpha is now doing containers, and we had showed them in some of our when we had beta customers and they were talking about how they used it. So we didn't have them on stage this year because we've already had them do that several times. So an architecture that's built for the next generation here, that, if I had to summarize it, well, not only is it a great replacement for current traditional architectures, but it's the absolute ideal building block for private cloud solutions, no doubt about it. Built to be able to do that. And I would say the world's simplest on-premises infrastructure as a service engine that there is, because infrastructure as a service is essentially built into the thing. You just ask for what storage, compute, and fabric you want to apply to workloads. And when you're done using those resources, they go back into a flexible pool. True infrastructure as a service, native in the box, ready to go, and customers are using that. So super happy about Synergy and the progress. And I would say, the thing I'm probably the most happy about. So I've worked at Hewlett Packard for 30 years. I was an R&D leader for a lot of those years. I've been running businesses now for almost 20 years. Have been on some of the most challenging products built from scratch inside HP in the history. And, when you introduce something that's brand new from the ground up, you'll oftentimes have some noise of, oh, there's this issue, that issue. It's just been fantastic quality since we came out with Synergy. And so we're super proud of that, just essentially no issues that we're chasing in terms of either a bug that we just didn't see or anything like that. So it's just been extremely a positive experience for our customers. The other thing I will say is, dynamic provisioning is a really cool thing, but just quick instant provisioning of the infrastructure when it shows up is really huge. And I was telling somebody this story, which is really pretty cool. But it disappointed us at first. So when we started shipping the first volume Synergy systems, I wanted to make sure that those were landing okay, that people were able to get them installed. I wanted to know what their experience was. I wanted basically firsthand feedback from those customers. So we said, we'll establish a program where for the first 50 customers, we'll send out somebody with the units and kind of see how did the install go. And so we would ship the units out, we'd send the team out to help with install. And what happened on most of the early ones is our team would fly out, land, go to the customer site. The customer would say, we already unboxed, racked it, turned it on, it's self-installed. We're already running workloads on it. We don't really need your help or anything. So we got zero feedback on the earlier thing, which is, that seems like a small thing, but that's actually really huge. I mean, on prior generation blade systems and things like that, literally, it could be weeks for customers to get it racked, get everything set up, get the software installed, be ready to deploy a workload. But that stuff is preloaded. So that's what we mean when we talk about a software-defined value proposition that has to do with an integrated platform that shows up ready and fit for use. And then the third vector, and then I'll kind of pause for questions here, is around our hybrid IT management platform. And this is something we unveiled with a sneak preview and a tech preview and some NDA sessions, but we're also showing some high-level demos publicly, something we call HPE NewStack. And what it's about is delivering hybrid IT management in the most simple way possible. So with the work we've been doing in Hyperconverged and in Composable, and the work that we've been doing in my group on delivering Helion OpenStack installations and cloud system installations, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about what it takes to be simple. We've learned a lot about what it takes when you're trying to do ultimate in customizability. And what we learned from the Hyperconverged experience is customers are willing to pay for the simplicity of infrastructure showing up, ready to go, turn it on, answer a few questions, and it's rocking and rolling. Same thing I talked about with Synergy. What we learned from our Helion OpenStack installs is that a lot of those were big scale, and we still have many going on, but the amount of customization that we were allowing and the number of knobs of configuration that we're allowing and having our service engineers help customers install and put those in, that's really useful when you're a giant enterprise or a telco or some financial institutions where you really want your private cloud to look like a global public cloud. And you want it to be specifically tailored to your specific needs. A whole lot of customization. We call those snowflake cloud installations, meaning there's only one like it in the world, and they're very customized. But what we learned from that is that's not simple, and your mainstream enterprises, from small to large, really want to be able to do private cloud that applies to their traditional and their new estate, their new applications, and they want that delivered in a simple way, a lot like Hyperconverged. So if Hyperconverged is an old school private cloud, basically a VM farm done in the most simple way, what if you could do a new school private cloud in a super simple way? So private cloud that shows up, the appliance installs for itself, it's able to deploy traditional workloads and container-based workloads, and it's also ready to manage across a hybrid IT platform, so on-prem resources and off-prem resources into public cloud, the one of your choice. And so that's what the objective of what we meant to deliver with NewStack. And we're well down the road. We have beta customers signed up to be trying that out here in the fall, and we're driving aggressively to deliver that as an appliance-like experience with a unified control plane that it connects up to deliver on this simple hybrid IT vision. So it's bold, it's dramatic. If you think about it, it extends on our composable vision, because if with Synergy we're composing compute, storage, and fabric, now with NewStack we're composing workloads and applications across on and off-prem resources, so that you can build microservice-based applications that can have, you know, a back-end database that looks traditional, but a front-end, mobile front-end that is fit for tradition or new style cloud installation. So very powerful, very hybrid. You know, back to the mission: make hybrid IT simple. These three vectors are really helping us do that. So I can fill in some more details around some of that stuff, but maybe I've been speaking long enough. Why don't I pause, take a few questions, and I'm sure it'll spur some other thoughts. So yes, fire away. Microphone coming. Oh, and please, when you have your question, say your name and who you're with. So
I'm Drew Conry Murray. I'm with Packet Pushers.
Yeah.
Could you help me understand how Composable is different from Hyperconverged, what the different value propositions are? And
yeah, sure. So Hyperconverged is really, at this stage of the game, the state of the industry for Hyperconverged is to do that VM vending as quickly as possible. VM vending and VDI, those are the two primary use cases that are in Hyperconverged. And it does it really well, and it's a completely integrated vertical stack where the VM engine is embedded within. You have a user experience on top of that, but it's just straightforward. Give me a VM farm and give it to me at, you know, not giant data center scale, but at pretty reasonable size scale, so that I can do robo, back office, small data center, you know, that kind of thing. And I don't have to have an IT staff that knows a lot about either administrating VMs or anything. I just am able to run and deploy workloads on it. That's the core value proposition. And it's a wonderful product, and we're thrilled to have our offering in that spot. And welcome Paul Miller, my VP of Marketing, so he can help answer some of the questions. So that's kind of the hyperconverged space. Synergy adds to that kind of capability in a couple of ways. First, it ups the degree of hybrid, if you will, because it can deploy multiple workloads, not just VMs, right? It can do bare metal and flex resources against bare metal, which is very unique. You know, to this point, if customers wanted to dynamically have workloads use infrastructure, they really had to use techniques around virtualization to do that. Now we can apply dedicated chunks of bare metal infrastructure to a workload without a VM kind of as the in-between or the go-between. So bare metal plus VMs plus containers. It's built natively to be able to run containers, Docker capability pre-integrated, and now just as of Discover, Mesosphere as well, written to the Composable Ecosystem API. So containers, and then of course we can support cloud native within those containers. So that it's kind of a lot more hybrid capable, but still focused on private on-prem, right? A Synergy is an on-prem capable device. And and the other thing about Synergy is just the sheer scale. So where, typical hyperconverged installations are in the tens of nodes kind of configuration, a typical Synergy can be up in the hundreds of nodes. And even beyond that, but huge data center kind of scale. So a lot more scale, a lot more workload flexibility, a little bit less on the top end user experience. So rather than deploying or managing kind of the VM environment, Synergy doesn't manage all that, it just enables it. So think of it as infrastructure as a service across a variety of deployment models, super simple infrastructure as a service. So if you want something that kind of does more orchestration and management above that on a Synergy or frankly on a SimpliVity hyperconverged kind of thing, that's what NewStack is about, is more workload orchestration and management of the hybrid IT estate assets. So, where are workloads running? What's it costing me to run them in these different locations? As well as a secure developer environment is also a piece of NewStack. In fact, we'll go back and kind of summarize NewStack in a bit, but just trying to give you a feel for how these three things differ. Now, notice they all differ. We kind of see them almost as a nested picture. Maybe I don't have to. We kind of showed a slide in my, and now I'm afraid to draw on tape, but we'll. SimpliVity. Then we draw it like this. Synergy. Then we draw it like this. NewStack. And you have to kind of think a little bit 2D and a little bit 3D, but so this would be degree of hybrid, meaning how hybrid? Well, this is VMs only and on-prem only. This is VMs, containers, bare metal, and cloud native, but on-prem only. NewStack then adds kind of the capability of private and public. So that's that dimension. And then this is kind of capability and scale, where what's added here, or what's down here is scale is kind of tens of nodes typically. We do big ones, but generally people are there. VM, sorry, I should have put VM, container, bare metals, whatever, all that. Capability and scale on this axis. So this is kind of tens in terms of scale. This is hundreds to thousands of nodes in terms of scale. And then this is on and off prem, so it's a lot larger. But then also the capability, this is integrated run a VM. This is infrastructure as a service in a lot more flexible kind of way, and this is true hybrid IT stack deployment. So that's kind of visually how we've been representing it, but the three kind of fit hand in glove. What I mean by that is they're all consistent with this software-defined value proposition of it arrives fit for purpose, ready to use. There's not a big science fair project to get this stuff put together to actually use it to run workloads, which is what people are really trying to do. And so that's what it is. It's about make hybrid IT simple means embed software technology so that it automatically arrives and kind of does this model. And even when I describe the value proposition or what the user experience of a NewStack kind of device is, it's similar to hyperconverged, except it does a lot more. Ships as software embedded in the appliances. We'll put that on our Synergy and SimpliVity. That's why we have the box drawn around the outside. Shows up, you answer a few questions, and it basically says, oh, I know I'm part of a private cloud. I know that I have peers. I know that my cloud has containers and VMs. I'm now part of that, and I'm ready to accept workloads. And a unified control plane then deploys workloads against those pieces of capability, the units of infrastructure in there. So that's kind of the how they differ, but yet they differ, but they're all part of a family to achieve this simple vision.
So can I infer from the name of NewStack that this is HPE's sort of taking a run at OpenStack and rethinking it for the
I wouldn't
enterprise?
say it that way, because actually OpenStack is one of the, we haven't figured out what to call them yet, but citizens within NewStack. So think of, it's not instead of, it's inclusive of, meaning if you can deploy VMs inside there of multiple flavors. Let's say, VMware VMs, KVM VMs, Hyper-V. those would be kind of citizens within the new stack kind of thing, and we manage those deployments. And OpenStack is a really good citizen to kind of run a VM deployment kind of thing, right? It's built to basically do that. Where on some of the other parts, like some of the containers, tools like Kubernetes are pretty good to deploy containers and manage that. Tools like Docker, tools like Mesosphere. So those would be the citizens, if you will, inside NewStack that would do that. So NewStack isn't about writing custom code from scratch to compete with the OpenStacks, the Dockers, the Mesos. It's more writing integration software that pulls those things together in the way that a customer wants and gives an environment that's kind of managed under basically a CI/CD kind of environment that says, yep, those are citizens. They behave by these rules. We've constrained the configuration. It's not any OpenStack config. It's this specific one locked down this way. And you can deploy your applications against that. So think of it as almost a platform where those are citizens within that platform and they have a role within it. Hope that makes sense. Yeah. Oh, and just tap me if you feel like, hey, I want a piece of that question. Or we could hand you a mic too if you want to just bail in. That's probably easier.
Testing. There we go.
All right.
Okay. All right, Rick, here we go. So 2 fundamental questions. One is in regards to your comments about private cloud. So Azure Stack is planned on Gen 9, right? The classic Gen 9. When does Synergy come into the picture for Azure Stack?
So we're driving in that direction. It's going to be probably in 18. Our first implementation of Azure Stack will be a rack-based thing. I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask because in the context of what we were just talking about. So what does all this mean to Azure Stack? Think of Azure Stack as yet another citizen within that. Just like customers can buy, they can buy Docker on servers and deploy kind of a containers kind of thing. Azure Stack is its own on and off-prem kind of solution, but when you're in Azure Stack, the customers there know they're in Azure. So it has to be consistent with all, it has to be written for Azure, has to be kind of Hyper-V is the VM model there. That it's in the Azure Stack domain, where New Stack is trying to say, no, this is hybrid IT, not just one flavor of on and off-prem. Both are a good thing. If a customer wants just an Azure Stack on and off-prem solution, Azure Stack is great. If a customer wants a hybrid solution where they're running workloads in Azure, in AWS, in Google, and in on their on-prem infrastructure, then they need something that helps them kind of manage and orchestrate across those platforms. And that's more what New Stack is about.
Okay, so second question is around those 400 customers. So when we spoke last fall in Southern California, we were talking about the beta customers, and there was some confusion on how many of them were actually using the converged workloads, right? I don't know if you recall the
I remember the question.
So of those 400 now, how many of those, so kind of 2 parts to this. One is, how many of those are service providers? How many of those are service providers versus enterprise customers? And the second piece is, how many of them are using it for that converged purpose as opposed to predominantly VM-based or predominantly the new style of applications?
So I'm gonna answer your question in a fuzzy way while Paul stalls and thinks about the exact numbers, because I don't have the exact numbers in my head. So that says I'm going to throw you in front of the bus.
I think we're about 30% service providers right now, maybe a little bit higher in the mix. But we have who's been on stage here with Symmetry is one on stage here. You have Scout 24, but or Muko, who's part of the Cloud 28 Plus. So there's a healthy 20 to 30%. I would say probably closer to 30% are service providers, and they range from large ones, rack space, and to smaller ones across the board.
Yeah,
and then
SAP. They're doing mixed.
Yeah, and they're all doing. Most of them are doing standing up for mixed workloads. So all the service providers, like Symmetry, is running. They basically a SAP managed service, and so they run HANA, the SAP landscapes, and then a lot of HANA, will use Hadoop as a data lake. So they'll run all that on the same platform.
But that's a service provider, right?
Yeah.
So what about on the enterprise space? Are the majority of, so if I say 30% are service providers and 70% are enterprises. So of the 70%, how many of them are running the mixed workload approach? I get the service provider,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it kind of goes back to our conversation last fall where it seemed like that just hadn't clicked yet. And so I'm curious, has it clicked? And have you seen that in the 70% of the 400 that how many of them are running the mixed workload?
So I would say it's starting to click. And to
Okay.
reference customers here, DreamWorks Animation, right? They're using it to support multiple different animations movies. So it's still a rendering farm, but they're using it to support multiple different animator.
Well, and they're doing more than rendering
Yeah.
on it, right? They're flexing.
But that's
yeah.
that's
And then-
kind of my point, right? Is I'm
No, but
talking
let
about
me-
VM versus the new style. That's what I mean when I
Yeah,
say
and then
mixed
what
workload.
they're doing though, wait for the rest of the story. Wait, there's more, Tim. So, the way animation works is artists work all day, machines render at night. So in typical render farms, the infrastructure stays pretty stagnant during the day because there's not a lot of rendering going on. So what they're going to do is they're flexing in the day to use it for lines of business apps. So that's an example where they're doing mixed workloads from their targeted, rendering, which is their expertise, to doing lines of business during the day. So that's one that's there. I'd say most of the customers are entering on one workload, and now you're seeing them expand to multiple workloads. Because they're just starting to kick the tires, if you will. We're 5 months into shipping. So we're seeing them start with one, but then add on and start working on mixed workloads. I would say most of them have purchased it, though, because it's a mixed workload environment.
Or because they believe that they will need to do that at some point, because their mental model for what their on-prem estate is going to look like in the future is a lot more like a cloud. I mean, they want to flex resources against that. So there's a future-proofing kind of play for them. But what's interesting, this question comes up is, hey, well, if it's got all this new capability, is that the only place you would sell it? And the answer is, if you just take the thing and say, compare it to either our C7000 blade today, let's say you just want to use it as a traditional workload kind of thing, of either a VM farm or bare metal, and you just want to use it that way. Number one VM performance on the benchmark, and number one SAP, number one
spec JBB. So the number one on 2 and 4 socket, 2 and 4 socket vMark, right? It blows everyone away on vMark, which surprised me because you'd think that pizza box or rack servers would be the top performing, but the architecture, the low latency of the backplane really shines performance. Spec JBB is kind of an all-around workload. They have multiple. We have number one on 6 of the Spec JBB benchmarks, and then the way SAP does it, you get in tiers, and we're in the top tier of the SAP. So, and these are all on Gen 9s. Gen 10 is coming. And frankly, we've got those 8 benchmarks because that's all the farther we've gotten. So the benchmarking is continuing.
And I'll chime in from there. So you would think, all right, you got leadership performance on just selling this as a traditional kind of infrastructure thing. Plus it's got this special sauce that allows you to do the kind of future private cloud kind of thing. Must cost a lot more. Answer to that is no, actually TCO of this versus any of our blade infrastructure today beats it across the board, except that the lowest one frame, it's a little bit more because you have a little extra capability from a composer, an image streamer that can do more than one frame. But as you add 2 frames through N frames, it's 15% TCO better because our management technology can just the management technology, the composer and that can run multiple frames. It's not built into every single frame. One plugged into one frame can manage for a whole bunch of others. So 15% TCO versus our own stuff. And then if you compare it to UCS, it destroys it across the board from a TCO point of view, from bottom to top, whether you're buying one frame or buying more. So for those customers, I mean, there's a strong value proposition to just say, upgrade your blades or rack to do virtualization or bare metal right now. And then you can use all the special sauce later if that's what you want to do. And a lot of our customers are doing exactly that too.
Another few more customers while I had some time to think. The Australian Academic Institute, I tried to get it right. They actually had, they looked across their portfolio of stuff they've rolled out over multiple years. 74 different types of systems, some with SAN attached, some with software defined, running all kinds of different elements. They did a floor sweep, and now are running all those workloads on Synergy. And their workload to support, students, their workload to support the research that they do. So there's some, compute farms in there. So they're really just said, I can't manage 74 different things and put them all together on one. One of the other customers you had on stage was the Washington Department of Transportation.
Yeah, I mentioned that before you got here. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they are also using mixed workloads. They're doing some of they provide a lot of mobile applications out to people to look at the traffic flow, to their operators of the ferries are all mobilely run apps, as well as they have kind of classic apps that just run, the operational side of their business. So that's another example of someone who's pushing mobile apps out to end users as well as employees, but then uses it for back-end operations to do scheduling and planning and whatever Department of Transportations do all day.
Okay.
Hey, Keith Townsend from the CTO Advisor and TechRepublic.com. So help us understand the roadmap a little bit and capability for NewStack, making hybrid IT simpler. The HPE has been talking about composable infrastructure, kind of this hybrid cloud IT journey for a couple of years now. From a customer base, I have to imagine there's huge business drivers for that. Customers have problems today that they need hybrid IT solutions for today. What are some of the leading demands for that you see that will be provided in either NewStack or the combination of Synergy, HCI, and all of the citizens of NewStack?
Yeah, so maybe I'll describe the kind of the state of the union in the customer, and then we'll talk about the specific kind of thing. So the state of the union in the, what should I say, the majority of enterprises today looks something like their CEO asks CIO, do I have a private cloud? And the answer is yes. Regardless of but the answer is yes. But what they typically mean is they have a VM farm. They have, VMware, Hyper-V, or KVM running on a rack of servers, and they call that a private cloud. But that private cloud doesn't look like the public cloud, right? It doesn't have micro or service-based capabilities. It doesn't have infrastructure as a service. All of those kind of things. And then if you ask them, hey, is your environment hybrid? The answer is yes, because we have some developers that have logged on to the public cloud and they're doing some development there. And then we have the other stuff that we just described. But that really isn't what I would call the ideal state of hybrid IT. Hybrid IT would be where application developers can develop applications regardless of whether it's on-prem or off-prem. IT operations has pretty easy administration regardless of whether it's on or off-prem, where DevOps environment that's enabled so that devs can do most of the ops kind of capabilities. And so the third thing is so that the lines of business can have a view of their estate both on and off-prem. So that gives you the landscape. Where are the tension points? The tension points are, I'll give you an example. I have a Midwestern company that's got a pretty heavy software value proposition. I won't tell you what industry they're in because it would be pretty obvious who they are, but a big one. And every morning at 9 a.m., they have a review with their CFO of the company. This is, Fortune 100 big company. Review with the CFO of their public cloud spend. They're spending, an hour a week talking about public cloud spend. Why? Because developers have run out to the public cloud, have developed apps, now they're using them, and that cost has run rampantly out of control. And that's a huge concern for the company. So that's an example of a pain point use case that they're saying, wait a minute, most of my infrastructure that I have today on-prem is underutilized, yet I've got this huge public cloud bill because I've got developers that are quickly running out to get the latest tool and all that. And the reason is because there isn't an equivalent experience on-prem to be able to kind of do that quickly. So It's a key element of NewStack. It tells you why we have that kind of capability. Another pain point, lots of customer, and so that's kind of a NewStack specific one around developers. Now let me give you more of an IT ops kind of thing. The state of data centers, if you will, is very siloed still today, and you know, most customers are still, I know that the words we talk about are further ahead, but most customers are still trying to get more virtualized as we speak. And in fact, for some of our data center infrastructure plays, half of that stuff goes out running bare metal applications and half runs virtualized, where you would think, well, most companies, aren't they 95% virtualized now? The answer is no, they're not. So, but those companies are under pressure, even for their traditional apps, to be able to make better use of the resources they have. And if they could do their provisioning across bare metal and virtualized workloads and take those silos and lump them together and be able to use that infrastructure together, much like Paul was saying about DreamWorks Animation, then they have to over provision a lot less, they get better resource utilization, and their costs go down. So, you know, these are the tense situations. These are the conversations that I probably bump into at everywhere I go. If I show up and it's, and what's interesting is visiting customers all the time, used to show up would only be the CIO. Now often it's CIO plus line of business plus app developer lead, and they're having a conversation about, hey, can we use some of our infrastructure that we're buying to run the business to also do app development? And the answer up to this point was not super easily. We got to solve that problem. Can I get a view of the expense across this so that the three of us, IT ops, line of business, and developer, can know where we're spending? Today, not very easily. You can get kind of a bill from the public cloud, but you can't really tell because it's CapEx kind of thing. Can I pay on a consumption basis? The answer today in on-prem, we can do it in our flex capacity. Most vendors can't do it very well at all. So bringing all those things together and saying, look, this is an estate of capability, and it's got to be managed in a cloud-like manner, in a simple manner, regardless of whether or not it's for cloud-native applications. The expectation has risen that even traditional infrastructure running traditional applications has to be shareable, has to be service-oriented, has to be DevOps, where I don't need a giant staff of people to do upgrades for firmware and all that. So the work that we're doing to make hybrid IT simple makes traditional IT a heck of a lot simpler as well. And that resonates like crazy with our customers. So those are probably a few of the key pain points that we're solving and that are part of the conversations we have every day.
Sorry, it jumped off again. Sorry. Just a quick clarifying question on that. So do your conversations with those companies get to the next layer of detail? Because what I see is that when you take those enterprise applications, and my perspective is that the applications move to public cloud, but they're not optimized for public cloud. And that's ultimately what drives the cost way up. And I've done a number of studies and metrics around this. And so then they want to come back. I mean, arguably HPE has a vested interest in wanting those workloads back because you sell more infrastructure, right? It's not optimized code. So of course, I get that. But what I'm curious about is if you get into the next layer of detail around how to optimize those applications so that the resources are used more effectively, not just, hey, you're using this much on public cloud, you're using this much locally. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. So,
okay.
You know, in solving a problem, sometimes the first step is awareness. So think of it that way. Step one in NewStack is awareness. Where am I spending my money? That'll help me kind of be able to say, oh, you know, didn't realize I've got this much going here, and it's easy. By the way, this Monday 9 a.m. thing isn't that easy, particularly when they try to say, well, is that a lot? I don't know. Let's compare it to my internal. Well, I can't tell you what the internal is because we paid by CapEx, and right. So providing that is a big step. So there's an awareness thing. But what's interesting to me, and this, you know, I will remember this moment, is you said something that we haven't heard in these meetings, which is a definite new thing in the industry. And you even brought it up, which is people are coming back. That conversation 2 years ago was like, no one will ever come back. Everything's going to the public cloud. It's just a matter of time, and it'll always be there. the conversations I'm having with customers now, and believe me, there is a place for public cloud and it will continue to grow. I'll be the first to kind of say that. But I think the difference in the conversation was 2 to 3 years ago, people were saying that's the end destination and it's a matter of time. Where now they're saying, no, it's hybrid IT. I'm going to have some stuff on, some stuff off. There'll be companies that have differing degrees of how much they want to be in either. But many companies aren't going to go through the effort of trying to optimize and, get a application kind of done a different way in a public cloud, particularly if they can do it in a cloud-like fashion, a bare metal application, don't have to rewrite, don't have to mess around, but I can get better utilization, better performance in the environment that I'm in today. Why go through a bunch of effort to move it? So that whole rebound, boomerang, there's this whole thing going on that's actually pretty new in the industry, and that is people are going, oh, I'm locked in. This costs a lot. That doesn't look quite exactly like I imagined it to be. Now,
arguably, it's been going on. It's just that nobody's been talking
about it. Exactly. I agree with you. But the fact that in a blogger session where we're talking about that kind of stuff, it comes up. It wasn't coming up. So I think it's awesome. Richard.
Yeah, thanks. Richard Buckle, Pilot Technologies. I may be older than some, but you talk about the pendulum. And I had to sit through where I had to get off my mainframe because I was going time sharing. And I got a little terminal, and everyone said the mainframe's dead, 1969. Well, we've seen a lot of this before. Synergy mixed workloads. Do you see the virtualized nonstop as being one of the workloads hosted on Synergy?
Yes, I do see that. I don't know if we've done it yet. I don't think so. But I think, I've been talking with my old friends, Randy Meyer and crew there, and now that they're fully driving in virtualization and containerization, I don't see a reason why not.
No, I saw from that picture.
Yeah.
I don't think
we haven't announced it as a roadmap thing, but I don't see a technical reason why we wouldn't do that. We just maybe haven't talked about it yet. Randy's playing with it. Randy's going to be mad because now we've publicly said he's playing with it. So.
Okay, I couldn't see any barriers to not yet.
No, I don't see a reason why not.
And would that, and would that help, and I hate to say this in this community here, but would that help bring nonstop even closer into HPE? If I can use that kind of expression?
Well, as a former leader of Nonstop at one point in my career, I think Nonstop is in HPE, as rich as it possibly. So I don't know if it can be closer or more in than it is. It's a hugely successful value proposition that is cherished by HPE. There's no doubt about that. I mean, and a very strong business and continues to modernize, running on x86 now, and running, KVM, all. So it's a strong value proposition. No issues there. It is a rich part of HPE. Okay, there's another one over here.
So it seems like a lot of great hero numbers around SAP, and I'm assuming that's SAP on Oracle. Synergy seems like the perfect platform for SAP HANA and other in-memory database solutions. Where's Synergy and certification for SAP HANA?
So the benchmarks, we're actually using HANA, and where we do have support for HANA now full. So you can configure HANA with this. We use the TDI approach, and customers can build images and deploy HANA in scale out or scale up. I think our 4-socket today has, how many terabytes of memory?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember. But we can do small, medium type HANA, right? It's not as big as what the Superdome X does, that can scale to 16 plus terabytes of in-memory data. I think we're in the 4 to 8 range for scale up, but then it's an excellent platform for scale out HANA. So we're just starting to push that out to the marketplace. We got certification roughly 45 days ago from SAP.
So that's great news. And then the other piece of it is, since you mentioned Superdome and the Synergy and composable platform, early question, Superdome, after hearing the hero numbers yesterday about the machine and what's capable, it seems like the perfect platform for composable, new stack, Synergy in general. where's Superdome? Where's the roadmap in integrating Superdome X into this this composable architecture?
I thought you were going to ask about the machine, so I was thinking about the different thing. So Superdome X, I believe we've announced OneView support for Superdome X. Yeah, if we didn't, we just did.
No, we did, yeah.
So that's one way to think of it. So a little bit like OneView runs on our current Blade system, but the current Blade system can't do quite all the magic of flexing resources because there were hardware dependencies in there that we kind of fixed when we did Synergy to make it so that all of that is seamless and you can plug anything anywhere and have it work, regardless of, you want to put all storage in this one and all compute in another one, fine. You want to mix it up, doesn't matter where you plug things, it's just infrastructure from the point of view of Synergy. Similarly, Superdome, you can manage it like a composable infrastructure, but it isn't built with all that flexibility in the chassis. And then I'm going to answer the question you didn't ask, but I thought you were headed to, because you said we saw the hero things on the machine. Those machine technologies like photonics and some of the memory-centric computing, to me, those are big time about disaggregation of resources, because things can be physically further apart and yet still appear close together with photonics, because you got super bandwidth and that kind of capability, giant persistent memory. All of those fit really well with the composable architecture. If you think about it, if resources can be disaggregated and put far apart, but yet dynamically composed, if you will, to run against a workload. So that is definitely part of our vision of where Synergy goes. Is right now we do disaggregation at the chassis kind of level, compute storage fabric within a set of chassis. But imagine that if you could do that across a data center or even outside a data center. The storage for this job lives across town, but we compose the storage for a given workload across geographical boundaries. Synergy's plumbed for photonics, because we believe that infrastructure, 10-year life of that infrastructure's got to be ready to go. So we've architected it to be ready to do exactly that. So it's just one example of the machine technologies working their way into the composable value proposition. All right, next.
For the new stack, it sounds like it's going to be the orchestrator for hybrid IT. As a business, how do you balance the fact that that's a good product that customers want to use versus making it just too easy to on-ramp onto the cloud?
You have to be confident that the economics of both on-prem and off-prem are going to be in the same range, and we're really confident because we can look right now today. You can go out and download a study done by Cloud Genera, who they basically do this as their business model, is do cloud assessments and see how we're delivering today VMs in a Synergy on-prem chassis for half the cost of what it'll cost you on Amazon. So if we didn't think we could compete from a experience and economics point of view, you might have something there where you're going, hey, aren't you making it easier for an on-ramp? Our mental model is there's no such thing as an on-ramp. Public cloud is a tool of infrastructure, just like private cloud is a tool of infrastructure, just like mission critical is a tool of infrastructure, just like, it's just another flavor of infrastructure. And over time, the difference between on and off-prem will get less and less relevant as the experience and the consumption model paying and all of that become more equivalent. Then it's just an economic decision, and we want to empower customers to play off whatever their best economic situation is. Our general advice to people who are embracing the cloud is that's absolutely a good thing, no problem with that. Just do it in a smart way, meaning focus on container-based deployment of your applications, because we believe in the future you're going to want to move those around. Don't focus on deep API, locked-in, walled garden, siloed, mainframe of the future type implementation to one particular public cloud in particular, because you'll be locked in, and that's probably not such a good thing for you. But absolutely, if you're developing in a way that is cloud agnostic, I think it's a great piece of technology, as on-prem will be as well in the future.
So let me answer that a little bit different way, right? I believe that there's going to be more clouds, right? The managed cloud is one of the fastest growing clouds out there, and our Cloud 28 partnerships and community, if you're not familiar with
That's a
them.
good point, too.
They are very excited about NewStack. We actually pre-briefed some about 2 months ago, and they are now, one of the big advocates. Because what we see is, and this is even with talking to Microsoft, right? Microsoft loves Azure Stack on-premise because they know, and the service providers are adopting it really, really fast. We announced, I think, 7 or 8 of them are on HP. It's not launched yet, officially launches second half available. But because the importance of having managed services as part of your cloud mix. And we think we're going to do the right things and have, on Synergy, on SimpliVity, the biggest portion of managed services running on HP gear. So as more of these multiple clouds come up, you kind of got, the big cloud providers, but the managed cloud one we think is going to be great. And then this platform of NewStack helps you manage across all that. So partners, I actually had a channel partner say, he had a similar type question, but then he started thinking about it and he says, oh man, now I'm part of your catalog here, and this will help me grow my business as well. Make sense?
So maybe then this question is slightly related. I'm thinking about what you said about NewStack and citizens and this whole sort of nested doll structure. So if Kubernetes and Mesos are citizens in NewStack, are you anticipating that different audiences are going to use different layers? Like some developers will use Kubernetes, some will use Mesos, and then there'll be a sort of a manager layer who's looking at NewStack, or do you also anticipate developers are going to use NewStack as an orchestration platform?
I'm not sure I completely grokked that. I was with you, right? So do you mean when we have an API coming out the top where people call NewStack? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Possibly. I mean, our general mental model is NewStack is the environment, the landscape, if you will, and there are pieces that plug into that, and that those are flexible kind of choices. And I mentioned, the ones that are there. I have one more story for you that's kind of related, but it kind of goes back to this app developer thing. I mentioned how I'm showing up more and more and seeing line of business, app dev lead, and IT operations guy in the customer meetings. We had one customer yesterday here that said they brought out their app dev guy and their infrastructure guy and in fact server infrastructure guy to check out Synergy on the show floor. And because they're having this internal battle about, hey, cloud, what does that mean? Does cloud necessarily mean off-prem, or does it just mean on-prem? Those kind of things. And so the guy took the two to the Synergy area, and then he came back to talk to him, and he said to the server infrastructure guy, hey, what'd you think of Synergy? And the developer guy jumped in and said, it was fantastic. I really want to use that for my app development. So that's kind of one of those stories where it's like, that's exactly what we're trying to do. That is not say, hey, you don't need a public cloud, but say, hey, these are implementation options, and they can be a lot more closely related than they seem and are currently today. So it just kind of tells you where we're at in this journey and making a ton of progress every day. So I think we're out of time. I want to make sure I at least say a few things and wrap or whatever. 3 minutes. Does it take me 3 minutes? We can do one more question and then we'll do a close.
So combined question from me and Tim, which is on, I think jumping off of your question, Drew, which is entry point into the hybrid IT cloud and where HPE plays a role in that. Today, shadow IT is driven by the developer. That AWS kind of owns that relationship. Seems like there's a need for HPE to also own not only the infrastructure relationship, but that relationship with the developer. Do you see that as a role of HPE with NewStack, or do you rely on your infrastructure company partners inside of the organization to kind of build and champion NewStack?
Yeah, so I have a deeper answer to that. I mentioned there are 3 key areas of development for NewStack. First, there's that how you deploy workloads and orchestrate and manage. The second was around the metering and analytics for the line of business. The third was around the developer and making sure that they have an on-prem experience that allows them to develop. And, I'll just address kind of the elephant that often comes up is, well, how can you possibly curate a development environment that keeps up with the public cloud? Because there's new tools and services and microservices going out there every day. And what we found in talking to the enterprises is, much like, you have a phone, Android or iOS, whatever, and there's 1 million applications that you could download on that phone. But if we went around this room and said, how many do we have downloaded on our phone, the sum total of that, it's probably 100 or 2 or, it's something, we don't have 1 million applications on our phone, even though they're available. I think that same is getting to be true in microservice developer kind of services, and that is there's a core set of them, and if you can enable those, then you can do most of the development. And hey, if they're not in that core set, then fine, go to where you need to get them to do that development of that specific microservice. But if you can orchestrate across where the microservices live, they don't all have to live together. Some can live in the public, some can live in private. Then you kind of have most of the use cases covered. So back to answering your question, we know we have to be relevant to the developers to make that on-prem experience similar, but we don't have to solve world hunger to be relevant to the developers. We just have to hit kind of the majority of the use cases. And the thing that we can do that's pretty cool is this way, for the on-prem stuff, the IT ops guys can be in control of which of those services the developers get to use a little bit, so that they can verify that these are microservices that are going to be secure, safe, that won't mess up stuff that's going on the rest of the enterprise. And that's a really strong value proposition in that context. So and that way the whole organization is happy, rather than kind of, you said, shadow IT kind of going on. If everybody's on board and you can get the same experience and you have what you need, then there doesn't need to be a whole bunch of shadow IT going on. So anyway, other thoughts on that one?
No, I think we hit it.
Okay. So anyway, want to thank you guys a lot. These sessions are always entertaining, and we kind of get a good pulse for what are the hot topics going on. So it's useful for us. I hope it's useful for you, and we'll look forward to doing this again soon. Thank you very much.